Transportation Policy Committee for the Lubbock Metropolitan Planning Organization. Acknowledge that a quorum is present. We are going to dispense with the safety procedures on agenda item 3. Also ask if there's any public comment. Anybody who's on the Zoom call that wish to make a public comment at this time. Hearing none, I will close public comment. And then, I'm sorry? I will close public comment and move to item 5, which is approval of the January 19, 2021 meetings minutes, the Transportation Policy Committee. Entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
I have a motion by Mr. Mandrell. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mayor Pope. Any comments or any adjustments that need to be made to the minutes? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor signify by doing one of these, because Steve Warren is number 1. Any opposed? Same sign. Jared, are you opposing?
No, sir. I'm slow. Sorry.
It's fine. It's going to be one of those days. We're just going to plow through this meeting best we can. Minutes are approved as presented. Thank you. Item 6, to discuss and take appropriate action to advance the resolution 2021-01 regarding the fiscal year 2020 annual performance and expenditure report to the Texas Department of Transportation. Mr. Jones.
Thank you. As I wrote in your agenda backup, our APER for our year-end report is required by law. We met all of our goals for 2020, spent 88.4% of our operating budget, and had a year-end savings of $55,360 that drops to the bottom line and will be carried over to 2021. Now you can see this on your summary budget report on page 16 in your backup. And then on page 17, you can see the same budget and expense numbers as a matter of reconciliation and transparency on the statement of revenue and expenses. The full APER was sent to you or attached to your agenda email, but some of the quick highlights include: in task 1.1, we launched the recruitment of our assistant director position, which is currently in full swing. In task 2.1, the staff continues to enhance the MPO's GIS capabilities by participating in the TexPac 2.5 workshop and training activities sponsored by TxDOT and TTI. In task 2.2, the city's GIS department continued to update our land use database. For the 2020 report period, they processed and uploaded 1,920 new residential permits. That's a 35% increase over last year, and 195 new non-residential permits, which was a slight decrease by 2%, into our land use database with attributed parcel geometry and geocoded centerline access. In task 3.1, the staff successfully managed one amendment to the 1922 TIP, adding a new twist by using a new Facebook Live platform as part of our public involvement initiative. And in that effort, we had 527 viewers for that public involvement meeting. We also successfully managed one amendment to the 2040 MTP that not only included roadway changes, but also some transit amendments with all the associated public involvement pieces, not to say the least about having to restart or relaunch the 21-24 TIP twice during the year. And it's still not approved, but it's close. And speaking of city bus, in task 3.4, they reported 146,902 successful performance hours, driving 2,241,958 miles, and carrying 2.3 million passengers for the year, and did an outstanding job, in my opinion, because they had to change directions in the middle of the fight, and they did it without losing a beat. And hats off to Chris and his crew for what they have done. Chris, you want to say anything about that?
No, I'll just briefly mention that, we, much like anybody else with COVID, had to take the COVID pivot, and we did that, and by including our on-demand service, and took the opportunity to really learn about what we can do and what our capabilities are and what works for the public. And I think that, with this change, we'll continue to see some of those changes going forward. I don't think we're close to being finished making some changes, and hopefully there'll be a lot of positive changes for the city. And so I appreciate the comment, but we're doing what much like everybody else is and trying to COVID pivot and improve.
Going on, task 3.2, still talking about city bus, they completed their fixed route study. Then in task 4.1, we completed our 2020 joint certification review that we'll hear more about in the next agenda item. Task 4.2, we are in full swing now to update our long-range plan to 2045. In task 5.1, we reported a budget underrun, which we're required to report to FHWA because we didn't charge as much of our time to congestion management activities as we anticipated we would. We actually spent more time, or Daryl did, spent more time developing and enhancing our capability with NEPA Assist and Compat. So Tammy and I didn't charge as much time to congestion management as we would have normally. However, Lubbock's traffic engineering department continued to accomplish numerous tasks to assist in the transportation planning process, like building additional fiber optic cable for intersection improvement, school zone operations. They added flashing yellow arrows on the signals at 74th and Quaker, 74th and University, 82nd and Vicksburg. And they started a project to convert one-way streets in the downtown area back to two-way streets for safety and mobility. With these noted highlights and absent any questions, I would ask you to approve the resolution and forward our year-end report to TxDOT.
Are there any questions for Mr. Jones? Thank you so much for your hard work, including your work on the budget. And as Mr. Mandrell pointed out, many of us are pivoting hard because of COVID, and none so much as you as well. So thank you so much, Mr. Jones. With that, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion by Steve Warren. I have a second by Jared Atkinson to approve the resolution as presented. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, call for the question. All in favor signify by holding up a finger. Are there any opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Thank you.
Item 7, to discuss and take appropriate action regarding the Federal Highway Administration, Federal Transit Administration joint findings and recommendations pursuant to the September 2020 Joint Federal Certification Review of the Lubbock MPO. Mr. Jones.
As noted in your backup, we schedule this certification review every 4 years, and it focuses on how well we comply with the federal planning laws set out in 23 USC 134 and 49 USC 5303. 23 is the highway planning law and 49 is the transit planning law, and both are written exactly the same. Completed in July 2020, the report that's attached to your agenda email covers the previous certification from 2016, the federal planning criteria, the current examination, and a summary of recommendations and findings, if any. Again, we are fortunate this review period and not having any noted findings, but we do have some recommendations that are highlighted by a recommendation that our 2018 memorandum of understanding that we have between the City of Lubbock City Bus and the MPO be amended to include the Public Transportation Agency safety plan targets and report, and we have to report that performance then in the 2021 APER that you just dealt with in the last agenda item. And City Bus has a similar year-end report that they have to report to FTA. They also want us to be sure to include all of our performance measures. That's PM1, 2, and 3. PM1 is safety. PM2 is pavement and bridge conditions. PM3 is freight movement. And we also have to include the transit asset management plan targets and the Public Transportation Agency safety plan targets, which aren't reportable yet until June 2021. We're supposed to include all that in our 2045 update with respect to the progress that is achieved in meeting all those targets. They strongly recommend that the transit update that we will put in our 2045 plan be consistent with the 10-year look ahead provided in the fixed route study recommendations, including the land use forecast contained in the recent City of Lubbock's comprehensive plan update. Chris, are you still on? Do you want to say anything there?
No, I think the easy part would be to include to get our agreement up to date to include the TAM and the PTSAP targets, which we've got completed. I know they've been delayed that due to COVID. We've got that completed, and we can make that easy to get that updated. And then as far as the 10-year look ahead, that's having to do with our comprehensive operational analysis that we're finishing up, and then the land use pieces for our next study that we're going to be doing is a facility feasibility study. And Brian Isham, the city director of planning, is included on that committee to help us kind of make sure we're using the land forecast and that kind of thing as we look at that study. So in our meeting with FTA and FHWA, they were very pleased and excited to know that those things are coming together and how we were doing those. So we're excited about what we're at, and I think that in the next year or so will be really, really good for us.
Okay, continuing on, the examiners want us to be mindful of any possible shortfall of funds due to the current health and economic crisis. And from the MPO's perspective, I think we're okay in that regard because Congress has already extended the FAST Act for another year and actually included a small increase in funding. So I think we're good there. They want us to be sure that our public involvement outreach includes all minority groups and not just the low income groups. And we've already started addressing that by picking up the NEPA Assist tool from FHWA and learning the ins and outs of that, along with TTI's compat tool, which will do some of the same things. So we'll be able to get into all of those kinds of demographics, and we'll do that in our long range plan. And then they want us in our next tip update, which will be the 23-26 tip. They want us to be sure to include a discussion of the success we have in achieving all applicable performance targets that I've mentioned already twice in this report. And they want us to include a discussion in that long range plan of how the fiscal constraint of the tip is provided for by the financial plan that supports the MTP. And we'll make an effort to do that. They also want us to update our public participation plan prior to the August 2021 target on our long range plan update. And they want us to use the change or the update in the public participation plan in the public involvement piece for our long range plan. And they want us to identify any special considerations or techniques that we use for engaging disadvantaged communities. Now, where that's coming from is we talked with them at length about how we use the Facebook Live platform in the TIP amendments, and they were interested in that. We also talked to them about the idea I've had for a while now to try to use water and light bill stuffers through LPNL to go out to everybody, and the QR code idea that we've already researched, and we're going to use that on our long range plan in that as well. So that's what all that is.
Mr. Atkinson, just real quick, how many LPNL customers still receive bills by mail, or how many are doing them all electronically now? Do you know? Do you have a ballpark percentage?
I don't, but let me see if I can get that for us.
I didn't know how effective using LPNL stuffers are to reaching everybody, or just reaches a smaller percentage of folks.
They are effective. They do. It is a much smaller percentage than normal, but Mr. Chair, it would not surprise me if you don't have somewhere between 30 and 50% that not only receive those bills, the number who pay in person off of those bills is
Substantial.
quite surprising sometimes. Yes, substantial. Let me see if I can get them started on that.
I would have figured, since I've gone all electronic, there'd only be about 2 or 3 people left out there that were still getting them by mail.
There are quite a few. The stuffers are quite sought after real estate.
Mr. Griffith is laughing. I think we may have identified one of those two. So.
Thank you all very much. Mr. Jones, I'm sorry.
Okay, no, that's quite all right. Continuing on, the examiners recommended that we add a member of the freight community to the policy committee and or the advisory committee. And they included in that recommendation for the Lubbock MPO to participate more in the small and medium MPO freight planning workshops that TxDOT hosts. And they want us to establish a relationship with the TxDOT Freight Division program manager. So we'll do that. They want us to make safety and security a separate chapter heading in our long range plan, since safety and security are identified separately in the national planning factors. And lastly, they want us to continue to examine the effectiveness of the regional ITS architecture and report when investments occur. And we've already started doing that. That's the very reason why I invited Jeremy Deering to one of our last in-person policy committee meetings to talk about transportation systems management and operations. That addresses that idea directly. And we will continue to do that. And if you recall, I wanted to do that on a quarterly basis every time TxDOT issues a call for changes in the tip. We'll bring Jeremy back and we'll go over that plan. In addition to the recommendations, the examiners also complimented the MPO on some things. If I can get back to it here just a second. They complimented us on our bike and pedestrian master plan efforts. They complimented our public involvement initiative through the entire planning process during this report period. They complimented our budget process, and they especially commented our elected officials' interviews. This year, they interviewed Ms. Harris, Judge Parrish, and Councilman Griffith. All that being said, the takeaway here is that FHWA and FTA jointly certified the Lubbock Metropolitan Planning Organization substantially meets the requirements of 23 CFR 450 and 49 CFR 613, and is thereby certified to continue to manage the federal transportation planning requirements. So again, short of any questions that anybody might have, I would ask you to accept the report from FHWA and FTA as presented.
Yeah, there are several different action items we can choose for this to accept the recommendations as presented by Mr. Jones. We can reject the review altogether and ask for a review of that and determine another timeline to do that. We can hold any of those actions, or we can ask for a formal in-person presentation by the examiners of the findings and recommendations.
Chairman.
Mr. Warren.
Mr. Jones, one of the things you mentioned was a recommendation to add a member of the freight community to the policy committee or the TAC. And Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure how we're going to implement that recommendation. If we approve this and accept these findings, do we have to make a decision on that at this point? And if so, that would make 10 members on the policy committee. Is that appropriate, or should we continue to look for an odd number of members? So I'm not sure which direction we're moving on that.
Well, I don't want to speak for Mr. Jones, but I would think, Mr. Warren, the recommendation was to either for the policy committee or the advisory committee, which I think would be able to handle that as well without adding an additional member to the policy committee. I don't know what action we would need to take today to do that, other than just as the staff works through these recommendations, they can bring us back a particular action item that would add a freight person to the advisory committee, would be my recommendation.
Okay, I understand that. And I agree. That's, if we decide to add it to the policy committee, that's going to require a change in our bylaws and everything else. And I just asked Mr. Wade to kind of give us his input on whether we need an odd number of members on this board or not.
It's always preferable to have an odd number on any board, so that you don't run into the situation of a tie vote, which would simply mean that whatever you're voting on fails. But it's always preferable to have an odd number. And I defer to Mr. Jones and to this committee as to whether you want to put somebody on. I think putting them on the TAC might be the best way to sit there and follow some recommendations if we want to add a member from the freight community.
Yes, I agree with Matt. You don't have to make that appointment anytime soon. Of course, we have a long time to deliberate this, And I have more discussion I want to bring you with regard to both the advisory committee and the policy committee as we get into amending our bylaws, which is part of our long range plan process. So as we begin to take each one of these different segments of the plan and discuss them, and I'll bring all this back to you in a different package and see what it looks like then. But as far as the overall report is concerned, it'd be my recommendation to approve the report, because we are addressing most of the recommendations right now.
Chairman, I move to accept the findings of the report.
Second.
I have a motion by Steve Warren, a second by Jeff Griffith to accept the review and the recommendations as presented by Mr. Jones. This is pursuant to the September 2020 Joint Federal Certification and Review of the Lubbock MPO. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, call for the question. All in favor signify by a finger. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Thank you.
Item 8 is our reports. And Mr. Jones, I know all of these are very important. We do want to get through these probably as quickly as possible. So I'll turn that over to you, Mr. Jones.
All right. The first report on page 20 and 21, you have a copy of an email from TxDOT's Public Transportation Division. And then on 22 and 23, you have a copy of an email from TxDOT TPNP, Planning and Programming Division, both requesting compliance with recent amendments to 2 CFR 200. That's the super accounting law. And the final rule that was passed provides that recipients of federal funds are prohibited from using those funds to procure, obtain, extend, or renew contracts for services, or buying telecommunications equipment that are produced by the named companies in those emails or their subsidiaries or affiliates from the People's Republic of China. Now, I've checked with the city's purchasing department, and I've checked with the city's accounting department, and both say that the city is compliant there. And since you are our fiscal agent, I will report to TxDOT that we are compliant as well. There's another amendment to 2 CFR that talks about eliminating the current for cause reason to terminate, and it replaces that for cause reason with a statement that says an award can be terminated if the award no longer brings progress toward achieving program goals or agency priorities. And certainly we don't have a problem with that. So we'll report back to TxDOT that we are compliant with that amendment to 2 CFR 200. Now,
so on those, we have to deal fairly with Israel and not fairly with China. Is this kind of where we're at?
I'm just saying.
Okay. All right.
As to the Texas Administrative Code changes, 9.133 lists remedies for non-compliance that TxDOT may impose if they determine that a grantee fails to comply with what we just talked about. 9.134 is a notice of remedies that states if TxDOT takes an action under 133, then they have to notify the grantee in writing, telling why, and blah, blah, blah. In 135, it there's an appeal of the decision on remedies, outlines how a grantee may appeal the determination made under 133. And the takeaway here is that it's my guess that when the next round of TxDOT planning agreements comes up for renewal, we'll have to go back and put all this stuff in our planning agreement. So I just bring that to you as a report.
Thank you.
The next report is on page 24 and 25, and I just wanted to put that in your agenda backup to let you see how I responded to Mr. Atkinson's suggested changes for Goal 1 and Goal 3 from our last meeting, to be sure that you, I feel like I appropriately addressed your direction there. So let me know if I didn't do what you thought you wanted me to do.
Mr. Atkinson, did that comport to I believe your motion? I looked back over on the motion. It looked like he included at least the items that are labeled in red.
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So this has already been approved.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
I've been asked on the next item, page 29 through 32, I've been asked to delay that discussion until we have firm numbers from the commission on the 22 UTP. We were supposed to have those already, but for some reason they still don't have them. So we won't go into that. And then the last report is our financial plan through December. It's the 25th percentile, and you can see that we're 89% collected on our revenue at this point, and we're 15% spent on our expenses at this point. So I think we're in good shape. And Mr. Chairman, that would be my report.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Jones, thank you very much. Is there anything further for the good of the Metropolitan Planning Organization?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Warren.
I'd like to take this opportunity to give a shout out and kudos to His Honor Mayor Dan Pope for the great job he did on the panel last week at the Transportation Forum. He spoke up for not only the Lubbock metro area, but the Ports to Plains Coalition, and thought he did a great job comporting himself amazingly, and didn't say a stupid thing all day. That kind of amazed me. So anyway, good job, Mr. Mayor.
Was that a compliment? I can't figure that out yet.
Close as you're going to get.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Judge, I felt pretty good about things till the last sentence.
Till that very right there at the end, it was all good.
No, I was joined by Mr. Warren, who also did not embarrass us. It's really the only time we've ever been together for an hour without taking a shot at each other, and I think we were able to avoid that. We were afraid what Commissioner New might do to us. So no, it was actually good. We got to participate along with a East Texas county judge and a banker friend of ours in Laredo, who's a big supporter of transportation. I was privileged to be invited.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. All right. If there's nothing further, I will entertain a motion to dismiss.
So move.
So moved.
We are dismissed. Thank you all very much. Have a blessed day. And hey, Jared, keep the power going, man. Come on.
I'm trying. I'm doing everything
Hey,
I can.
and just as a note of comment, I'm glad we do not live in Abilene. That's all I'm saying. We don't live in Abilene.
Well, and interestingly enough, I've taken 3 megawatts of load off the system by running our plants and pump stations on generators since yesterday at 11.
Thank you.
So we're trying to do our part, but appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.